Hello students, welcome to Dr. B.R. Ambedkar Open University. Welcome to the part 3 of the session. This is about Minnow brook Confuences 3. Try to remember students, when we are talking in the context of new public administration, which is part of trends in public administration. So, when you look at the Minnow brook Confuences 3, what we are trying to understand here is about the background here. And also when you look at the background, like as I have been telling that for every Minnow brook Conference there was a background. When it comes to the Minnow brook Conference 1, the background was the crisis that happened during 1960s in America. When it comes to the Minnow brook Conference 2, that happened a crisis at the global level through the invention of LPG and also the invention of the internet. And also when you look at the Minnow brook Conference 3, then there was a shift from new public management to new public service. Remember that when you talk about new public management, it is about the reducing the gap between public administration and the private administration. But when you are talking about new public service, it is more about giving more weightage to the bureaucrats. So, we have a background to understand about this. In 2008, 40 years after the first conference, a third Minnow brook Conference gathering was organized and at the Syracuse University. The world had changed again profoundly after especially in 9/11 attack, that is on World Trade Center, and hurricane and also other natural calamities that happened at the American context especially, and also the Iraq war. These are some developments that resulted into the crisis again. So, these crisis has questioned the relevance of public administration again. So, in this backdrop you had a conference called the Minnow brook Conference 3. Key themes of Minnow brook Conference 3. Minnow brook Conference has rejected the lone bureaucratic agency. In other words, there was an assumption, there was a belief, or I would call it as over expectation by the public or even by the government itself, that government or the public administration is the only savior of the world. So, this belief or assumption was completely rejected by the Minnow brook Conference 3. It believed that government, when you talk about government, it is one of the important organs, public administration definitely, but same time public administration cannot be alone. Public administration cannot provide services to all the expectations of the public throughout the different generations. So, the realization is that when it comes to administrators, when it comes to bureaucracy, it has to partner with other stakeholders in the society to accomplish the prefixed goals. So, this is what we call responding to the wicked problems. In other words, problems without simple solutions like climate change or urban poverty. So, when you look at the problems like climate change, government or the administration cannot handle these problems alone by the public administration or alone by the bureaucrats. Reason: climate crisis is the result of multiple factors. It is not the failure of the administration. So, it has to look at into the political commitment, it has to look at into the individuals, it has to look at into the realization, it has to look at into the awareness camps, it has to partner with the private entities, especially the NGOs. So, in this context, let me tell you that NGOs also emerged as the other alternative to the bureaucracy, especially after the Minnow brook 3 conferences, and argued for what? Argued for collaborative government. So, it is not alone bureaucracy agency, but it is a collaborative government, means working with the civil society, private sector, NGOs, citizens to solve the public problems. So, when it comes to solving the problems, bureaucrats cannot be working alone, it has to collaborate with the other stakeholders in the society, then only the problems can be solved, especially the problems related to the universal issues. Okay. And also rejected steering the public. In other words, the role of facilitator was rejected. In other words, especially in Minnow brook Conference 2, it was recognized that the role of bureaucracy is the role of facilitator. But when it comes to Minnow brook 3 conference, it has rejected the concept of role of facilitator by the bureaucrats, and argued for what? Argued that new public service means serving the public, valuing the citizenship over the entrepreneurship. So, government and the bureaucrats should focus more on the citizens than on the entrepreneur, was the important in fact character of the Minnow brook Conference 3. And Minnow brook Conference 3 also rejected generic approach. What do you mean by that? Treating all sections as public. In fact, in other words, when you look at the title of the subject itself, public administration. So, we treat public as a whole and administration also as a whole, but here when it comes to Minnow brook III conference has rejected looking at the concept of public administration as a whole entity. So, it argued for the inclusion of race, gender in public administration. So, here when you look at the administration, how we have a tendency of treating the administration as a whole, which was also again questioned in Minnow brook Conference 1 and 2. Similarly, now there is a question on treating the public administration as a whole. So, you can't treat public administration as a whole, otherwise we will be missing the important components of public administration or public, especially in terms of race, gender, and Indian context, caste also. So, climate change, environmental administration emerged as a major key themes. As a result, the scope of public administration got expanded and became truly international and international public administration. Just to understand in a simple terms, when it comes to the public Minnow brook Conference 3, to summarize, the 3 Minnow brook conferences mark major moments of intellectual renewal of public administration, and it has expanded the scope of public administration to a great extent through different conferences. When you look at Minnow brook Conference 1, which happened in 1968, brought social equity, relevance, and also value commitment to the force. Okay. When it comes to the Minnow brook II conference, it has reasserted democratic governance in the face of managerialism. So, it tried to reduce the gap between government and the private sector. When it comes to Minnow brook Conference 3, emerged collaborative governance, wherein there is a realization that administration cannot function alone. It has to work with other stakeholders like the NGOs, the media, and also the political parties and also civil societies. So, these 3 important conferences held in different years also contributed to a great extent in terms of expanding the scope of public administration, and these 3 conferences demonstrate that public administration is not a static discipline and it responds to the social crisis, it responds to the political challenges, it also results into evolving ideas about democracy, equity and governance. So, with this discussion on the Minnow brook conferences, what we realize here is that these all 3 conferences have contributed to the field of public administration in terms of expanding to the scope of public administration and majorly making public administration relevant to the society. So, when we are talking about the relevance to the society, what we are talking about? We are talking about expanding its scope, making public and administration more relevant. When you talk about public, it is also recognizes that public is not a as a whole, but whole entity, but also it includes multiple characteristics of the public administration, that includes gender, that includes region, that includes religion, caste, everything. So, in other words, the expansion of public administration not only resulted into just about expansion, but also it is going into the depth of the discipline of public administration. By going into the depth of the discipline, what we are trying to emerge as more relevant to the society. Then only remember one thing, that public administration has been criticized that it is very static, it is not easy to teach and it is a dry subject. But through these different conferences, what we realize that it has become more relevant to society, it is becoming more responsive, it is becoming more responsible, and it is also becoming more accountable to the public. So, in this way, public administration is not just a standalone subject, but it is also a subject which is going to impact the lives of everyday lives of the citizens in the every country. Thank you.